and round the world there sounds a silver bell. Wherever on the land or sea the folks have things to sell. It rings on the equator and its echoes rise and roll across the side.
The history of NCR begins with John Patterson. I am here in Dayton, Ohio at his monument. That's an honor for all the leadership that he provided to the company. This is a 50-acre property that John donated to the city for purposes of employee well-being and recreation. Many of the values that John instilled in the company are alive and well with us today. Values like innovation, treating customer as number one, the wellness and care for employees. Stay with me as I travel to other important sites here in Dayton, Ohio about NCR. So now we're here at the Carillon History Museum. Let's hear in person from our founder, John Patterson.
There is nothing you cannot accomplish. I started this company when I saw the potential of an invention by James and John Rigg, two local saloon owners who recognized the need to keep their bartenders honest by creating a method of accountability in sales transactions. I took their incorruptible cashier from Dayton innovation to global success. Not that we didn't have obstacles. Early on, our cash registers were acting up, malfunctioning. So I moved my desk to the factory floor to find out why. And what I quickly saw was a dark and dirty environment. How are we going to produce quality mechanical machines in a place like this? So we are cleaning up our act, creating clean daylight factories with floor-to-ceiling windows to provide fresh air. For you, my employees, I've set up lending libraries, suggestion boxes, made medical care available in the factory with company doctors, provided hot soup and malted milk to keep you healthy, and developed trades programs for your children. And it's working. Productivity and quality are off the charts. We are now producing over 500 machines a day. You've read our motto all over the factory. One simple word: think. I understand a prized employee, Mr. Thomas Watson, plans to use that exact slogan when he turns Dayton Computing Scale Company into something called IBM. Now that we are modernizing the way products are made, I thought, why not revolutionize the way we bring them to market? So we divided the marketplace into territories, established sales training classes, and a commissions program to reward success. We're pioneering direct mail, and I fashioned another brilliant slogan to be used on all our advertising: get a receipt. I sure like the sound of that. Now, as I was saying...
Speaking of get a receipt, here we are in the famous cash register room with Brady Kress. Brady is the director and curator of the Carillon History Museum, which chronicles NCR's history and the contributions to the 20th century economy. Brady, first of all, thank you so much for hosting the executive leadership team here back in January, and the meeting that we held here was very insightful. Thank you again for all that you do to preserve the history and display it for the larger community. And appreciate your help today as we chronicle a lot of the key events that led up to NCR's history.
Well, thank you, Bill. It's a great pleasure to share NCR's story and the many contributions and remarkable achievements of the early NCR leaders who changed the world with their genius, initiative, and enthusiasm right here in Dayton, Ohio at NCR. And look at this, get a receipt. This very idea Bill was talking about was genius. John Patterson used this idea, the receipt, a French word meaning recipe, a listing of what you paid for something, what the quantities were, and why wouldn't you want to have a receipt of what you purchased. John Patterson used this to go directly to the customer. Don't do business with somebody who doesn't want you to have an accounting of what you just purchased and what you paid for it. It was really Daytonian James Ritty in 1879 that develops the Ritty dial. This is the first machine really dedicated to tracking business transactions. And this is what John Patterson and his brother, in running their store, really fell in love with. So much so that they ended up buying 2 of these incorruptible cashiers. And by 1884, John Patterson and his brother take controlling interest of National Manufacturing Company and change the name to the National Cash Register Company. It was really the English in 1887 that saved the company. John Patterson was strapped for cash, and he got an order for 40 machines to be sent over to England. This collection of registers not only represents what was being sold here in the United States, but all over the world. Not only those English registers, but behind me, some German registers, and on this other side, some registers for the French market. It was here that NCR truly became one of the United States' first international companies.
There are a lot of technology companies who start their initial incubation in a garage or in a barn, in our case. Welcome to the Deeds Barn, where many of the most revolutionary inventions of the 20th century happened, such as refrigeration, electronic starters for automobiles, and really important to our company, the electronic mechanism for the cash register. So let's go inside the barn now and see what Boss Kettering is up to today.
Well, it was a sizzling hot summer day back in 1904 when I started work in the inventions department at the National Cash Register Company. My favorite professor at Ohio State, Albert Cole, arranged for me to talk to one of his former students, an NCR man named Edward Deeds, about a position with NCR in Dayton. Deeds hired me on at $50 a week. When I received my first paycheck, I thought they'd made a mistake, and I tried to return some money. I thought I'd been hired on at $50 a month, not a week. For someone like me, who had been working as a school teacher at $250 a year, $50 a week was a lot of money. But I'd say I earned my pay at the NCR. I developed an electrical motor for an electrical cash register that Edward Deeds had come up with. And with Richard Grant, I invented the OK telephone, a credit approval system that ties a store telephone to a solenoid-activated stamping device that lets one clerk approve credit sales anywhere in a store. Bill Christ and I developed an entirely new cash register, the Class 1000, in just 6 weeks. And I oversaw the development of the famous Class 2000, which became the mother of accounting machines. Not too bad, I'd say, for only being at the cash for 5 years. Oh, and in case you're curious, it was while I was there that my colleagues started calling me Boss Ket.
NCR, always listening to its customers, moves from the Ritty dial to buying a number of patents, one being the indicators on the front, the other being the cash drawer. But as they're listening to those customers, they want to make sure that their machines are the best in the industry. Having wooden models with the expansion and contraction caused some issues, so they move to the brass models. Now with this, they start to get requests from merchants for more and more calculations as they're doing business in retail stores and multi-department stores. This creates so much mechanical churning in the machine, they need to figure out a way to electrify it. They do that, and by pushing a button, they no longer need the crank on the side. This innovation ushers in an entire world of electromechanical machines that dominate the accounting machine and the business machine, the banking machine market for decades. This Class 2000 dominated the market for almost 50 years.
So Brady just took you through the cash register era and into the accounting machine era, which lasted all the way up until the early 1950s. In that time frame, NCR realized we really needed to become a computer company. And as things innovated, NCR was one of the first companies to actually have a mainframe computer. Now this is just the console of the first solid-state computer in the industry, known as the NCR 304 Century Series computer. The rest of the computer filled up an entire room, entire data center, just the console here. Also during the 1950s, it was the era of the electronic bank posting machines. Before we had ATMs, there needed to be a way to capture the debits and credits and balance the bank accounts. This was done through the electronic bank posting machine manufactured by NCR. So during the 1950s, there was a race. Other companies like IBM and others were trying to figure out how to create a fast retrieval for memory. NCR's approach was known as CRAM, C-R-A-M. That's short for Card Random Access Memory. Now this machine here, a CRAM unit, held up to 88 megabits of memory. Now imagine that. You could do this on your cell phone today many times over. And then in the early 1970s, there was a huge disruption in the cash register market. Why? As the Japanese entered the market with low-cost electronic cash registers known as ECRs, NCR was just attempting to phase out the electromechanical cash registers that had been our cash cow for 100 years. So this unit in 1975 was actually the last electromechanical cash register that NCR Dayton brought to market, known as the Class 5. At that time, we were also dabbling and bringing to market electronic point of sale. Now there's a new term, point of sale. It's got much more features and much more electronics, including the LCD readout. The liquid crystal display was actually innovated and invented at NCR for a duration that didn't burn out at that time, and you'll find that in your alarm clocks and other devices today. Now notice the form factor change as we come to the mid-1970s. This small unit, it's 100% circuit boards, right? It's got the LED readouts, it's got the circuit board, and it has one other thing that NCR invented. The Universal Product Code, the UPC code, was invented by NCR scientists and became a method for quickly being able to scan. So scanners were attached to point of sale, and that really revolutionized the industry and made it more accurate to do the reading of the price as opposed to reading ink that was on the label of the goods. One of the other important inventions that came about in the late 1950s was this concept of microencapsulation. Now you might ask, what's that? We had the need for eliminating carbon paper. Carbon get messy, ink all over your hands. Brought it to market and the ability to create a personal check and have a copy of the personal check without the messy carbon. And that was known as microencapsulation, invented at NCR by some chemists in the 1950s, and it came to market really in the 1960s and stayed there through the 1970s, and if you have checks today, you would recognize this. Also the scratch and sniff technology that you scratch and smell from magazines, that was also part of the microencapsulation that was invented at NCR. In the 1970s, which was a really important period for NCR transforming, as we said earlier, from the cash register to the point of sale, but also enter the ATM in the early 1970s. This invention is still, as you know, our most important product today, amongst others. The ability to transact all of the capabilities you would have transacted with a human teller were encapsulated in the ATM itself. And this is a unit on display. There have been some markets that NCR entered and then got out. We could not compete. The PC industry is one example. In the mid-late 1980s, we exited that industry. We had actually entered the industry with this unit back in 1983. The first NCR PC was a Decision Mate 5. We just couldn't compete and get with the likes of a Dell and HP in market share. We exited that business. It was not profitable. And then let's take it home to where we are today. Our pillars, right? We talked about finance and banking, and now we talk about the retail, the self-checkout being a unit here that's on display from about 2000, but has all the basic features that you would recognize today, the self-checkout device.
NCR is a great company that was founded over 100 years ago on innovation. If you think about our roots, we started as a company that sold mechanical cash registers, but the solution that we provided to our customers and to the world was the receipt. It doesn't get any more innovative than that. We moved beyond the mechanical cash register to accounting machines, computers, ATMs, and we continue to transform and innovate to support the markets that we serve. You look at what we do today, we're still solving our problems of retailers and restaurants and banks around the world. When you look at what we do today, we're connecting consumer endpoints. We're connecting endpoints through different means. We're no longer a mechanical cash register and printing on a piece of paper. We're connected in the cloud. We're connected through the platform. We're completing payments in a digital world. This is an exciting company that's founded on innovation, and we're going to continue to innovate for 100 more years to continue to make this a great company.
So you may have noticed when I went through the last 75 years of those great innovations and inventions from NCR that there was a noticeable gap in the years in the 1940s. There's a reason for that. In the 1940s, all US-based companies were asked to contribute to the war effort. NCR was no exception to that rule. In fact, NCR was asked to take on one of the highest top secret projects at the same level of secrecy as the Manhattan Project that built the atomic bomb. And here to talk about that special NCR project is Karen Blackwell, fellow Dayton-based NCR employee.
One of the best examples of innovation and teamwork, along with government relations, was the development of the World War II code-breaking technology that was developed in NCR's Building 26. I'm standing in front of this technology. It was known as the bomb. It was decoding technology developed by Joseph Desch, NCR engineer, and labor that was provided by the Navy WAVES. The WAVES were the women accepted for voluntary emergency services, and they stayed at NCR's Sugar Camp training facility, and daily they would walk about a mile down to Building 26 to perform this top secret work. NCR was able to actually mass produce these code-breaking machines, which in turn allowed us to hack into German U-boat communications. This allowed both the US and British navies to sink the U-boats that were hiding in the English Channel. This helped us win the war.
I'm standing here on top of the hill known as Sugar Camp, amongst a setting of sugar maple trees. Thus the name Sugar Camp, when John Patterson decided he needed a venue to train the salespeople when they traveled in from afar. It was this location he picked here on the hillside, south of the NCR factory property. Initially, they established tents for that training. John used flip charts, the primer book, and other sales techniques that became standards for modern-day sales organizations, like setting quota, like honoring winners of sales attainment in a celebration known as Century Points Club, or CPC. The property morphed over time from tents to eventually wooden cabins where they stayed overnight to eventually this modern campus you see here today, consisting of 5 buildings, very modernized, equipped with technology for training, not only sales, but also NCR management, all here on this property known as Sugar Camp.
So for more than a century, the values and traditions that Patterson established around the customer have sustained. And when you think back about how he raised those, how he brought them to life through Sugar Camp and the traditions around the sales force, the territory management, and most importantly, the relationships that we need to establish with our customers around the strategic imperatives and challenges that they were facing every day, still are impressive as they were back then. And what we as an organization have tried to do is reinforce all that message. And you see it here with treat every customer like they're our only customer. So 100+ years of emphasis around the customer, reinforced with great traditions around the sales organization, the reward systems, including the CPC, but most importantly, never losing sight that at the end of the day, it's all about the customer. And we got a chance to see that when we were in Dayton. We got a chance to see that throughout all of the traditions that have survived from the very beginning with Patterson.
In order to understand how NCR was positioned to assist in the Great Flood of 1913, we must first understand the topography of the Miami Valley, and specifically the 3 rivers that converge near the downtown city of Dayton, depicted here in blue. The 3 rivers converge in a fishhook shape, which is conducive to a great flood. Now, John Patterson foresaw this horrible event when he built the factory here in yellow on the high ground south of town. The NCR factory was built on what was known as Far Hills. And John Patterson therefore said, let's stay on high ground in case there's a great flood someday. So it turns out in March of 1913, the ground was frozen. There were several days of heavy rain just after Easter weekend, and the levees did break. Now, before the levees broke, John had a premonition the night before. He gets up early. He has his driver take him to the levee of the Great Miami River about here in the downtown Dayton area. and he sees the water is at the top of the levee. He then drives back to the factory here in yellow very quickly and begins to blow the factory whistles every minute, as you can hear in the background of this recording, so that all the citizens of Dayton can hear the whistle blow. They can wake up and be warned about the great flood to come. Depicted in blue is actually the flood that occurred. Everything that's in blue became underwater. And again, as we said before, the NCR property here in yellow near the fairgrounds and depicted in black, the water receded almost to the NCR property but stopped there. With all those whistles blowing in the background, John Patterson now has everybody's attention. He then calls a very important meeting and instructs his entire leadership staff to be present for a 6:45 a.m. meeting. At this meeting, he proclaims the National Cash Register Corporation, heretofore will be known as the Dayton Citizens Relief Association, for purposes of rescuing the citizens of Dayton during a great flood today, even though the levee is not broken and the flood has not occurred yet. John then instructs his team to be reorganized as follows. First, we need the woodworking department to go make at least 200 John boats, each of them to seat 6 people and an oarman, to go out to the city and rescue the citizens from their flooded homes. He assigns the other organizations as follows: the commissary to go bake bread and gallons of soup, the hydraulics to drill for all the fresh water that we're going to need today, and so on and so forth. The entire company was reorganized along these lines so that we had all the capabilities to rescue and feed and clothe the city of Dayton. The entire headquarters, in fact, was converted to living quarters and maternity wards for the citizens as they were rescued from their flooded homes. At 7 a.m., the meeting concludes, and also at 7 a.m., the levee did break, and thus the flood commenced. So in 15 minutes' time, John Patterson had repurposed an entire Fortune 500 company for the sole purposes of rescuing a large city in one of the greatest disasters that had ever happened in the Midwest.
Not only was Dayton the center of the world when it came to innovation from a technology perspective, it also knew how important people were. Mr. Patterson made sure we understood 2 groups of people were really important: our customer, which you've heard talked about earlier, and importantly, our employee set. He knew that he needed to take care of our employees to make sure they were healthy and happy, both at work and when they went home. He needed to make sure that they enjoyed living in the communities that they worked in and lived in. And he needed to make sure that that community got through crises like the floods. And he helped out with a war effort. He broadened out his reach to make sure that we stepped up as a company in times of need during the war. Fast forward that to today, we're hoping to pick up on some of those trends that Mr. Patterson led, and to pick up on some of the things that he described as important at the time. Our customers still remain important. Our employees are every bit as important as they've ever been. We continue to invest in our employees to make sure they have good benefit packages, that they have career development opportunities, and the communities within which they live are healthy and happy. We also invest through the foundation back into those communities. Most recently, the campaign, the NCR for Good campaign, put about $200,000 directly through the efforts of our employees back into their communities and help them extend the reach of the foundation to be very specific in the giving. I'm very proud of that. The foundation has upped its giving to almost $5 million annually, about 5 times an increase over where we were just a few years ago. And we've been very conscious of the number of communities we're now in. We're not one community anymore. We're not just Dayton. We're hundreds of communities. We're thousands of communities around the world. We're doing our very best to put those dollars to work in very effective and good ways.
We are here at Old River Park. Directly behind me, you'll see the old World Headquarters building that was used from its construction in 1974 up until the date of the move in 2010 to Atlanta, Georgia, of the new headquarters down there. In this park, it was dedicated to employee recreation. Many families enjoyed this park, including the Untener family from Southwest Ohio. Julie, tell us about how the families enjoyed this great recreational area.
Sure, I'd love to, Bill. But before I get started on Old River Park, I want to talk a little bit about what set the stage for this employee focus and well-being that John Patterson started. John Patterson was a true pioneer in creating positive work environments for his employees. This even gained the attention and interest from other business leaders like Henry Ford and others who visited and would learn from the factories here. In the factory, John Patterson was one of the first to provide floor-to-ceiling windows in the factories that opened. This provided both fresh air and daylight for the employees. In addition to that, he provided washrooms and bathing facilities for the employees to use at a time when these were not readily available in most common homes. He also, in addition to that, was one of the first to convert away from coal in the factories and the engines to improve the air quality for those employees. And his focus on employees did not stop in the factory. He provided green spaces and exercise programs on the NCR campus. He introduced suggestion boxes for the employees, and he provided lending libraries and even provided night classes for the employees. The result of this was an overall improvement on the quality of life that also, as a benefit, provided productivity and quality improvements for the plant. Now leading up to the Old River Park here, in 1937, Colonel Deeds, as NCR president and CEO at the time, developed this 133-acre recreational park for the employees to use. Not a public park, it was strictly for use of the employees and right on the NCR campus here. It provided picnic groves, tennis courts, baseball diamonds, a lot of intramural leagues within the company. There was even a 1.5-mile lagoon around the world headquarters where employees could canoe, paddle boat at lunch and after the workday to take advantage of that. Once a year, it evolved into really having the family days that Bill spoke to earlier. And these were so fun, where employees got to bring their families to this wonderful park. They had use of the pool, but it really turned into more of a carnival with snow cones and cotton candy and games and activities for the families to enjoy all day long. Really a highlight there. And again, one of the key highlights of the park was this amazing swimming pool, one of the largest ever, that accommodated 5,000 people at any point in time. This early focus on employee focus served really as a strong foundation for the employee focus and our overall NCR values that we have today at NCR.
I really hope you enjoyed this trip through NCR's history and a travel around Dayton, Ohio.